Welcome to The Swing of Things, a podcast covering all things rowing within the United States. We talk a bit about rowing and a lot about other things. I'm your host, Amanda Kraus, and the podcast is produced by Row 360. Welcome to part 2 of our mini-series on junior rowers in America. In this episode, we learn about ADM, or the American Development Model. My guests are U.S. Rowing's Director of Youth Masters and Safety, Chris Chase, and Kenzie Coning, the Coordinator for Coaching, Education and ADM at the USOPC. Chris and Kenzie, thanks for joining us this evening.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited for it.
Yeah, so this is part 2 in a series focused on youth rowing. And really happy to have Kenzie joining us from the USOPC. I know you wear many hats with all different sports, so feel free to chime in about different sports. Doesn't need to be just focused on rowing. But I thought for the people who are sort of new to ADM and have no idea what that even stands for, you know, Kenzie, if you don't mind starting us off and just telling us what is ADM and how would you summarize it for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. So ADM, or the American Development Model, is ultimately based on Canada's long-term athlete development framework. But ultimately put into the American context. So back in 2009, USA Hockey developed and launched the model in an effort to develop better players through age-appropriate guidelines and quality coaching practices. So in 2014, the USOPC then saw the great work that USA Hockey was doing, wanted to dig in a little deeper, and ultimately partnered with USA Hockey to adapt and adopt ADM in a way that could be applicable across all sports. So that effort really stemmed from research at the time, just showing a huge decline in sport participation. I think it was in 2015 that the Aspen Institute released a report showing that sport participation rates had declined drastically over a 5-year span by almost or over 2.5 million fewer kids. So definitely startling. And so saw a need there. And even more recently, through the COVID-19 pandemic, obesity rates have continued to go up. So a lot of research has come out to affirm and validate the need for this type of work to create more positive and healthy sport experiences. So that's ultimately what ADM hopes to achieve. And in the coming years, we're excited to continue to see it through.
Thank you. That was a good summary. And Chris, can you speak to ADM in the context of rowing for us?
Well, what's amazing about rowing is it's a lifelong sport. And so I feel like when you join rowing, we're not traditionally have the same entry points as many people. For rowing, you can enter when you're in middle school or ninth grade, or when most kids do. But you can also join at any point as you're in your adult years. You could be 54 years old and have never done the sport and develop a love for it. So we're one of the unique sports that you can join at any point along your lifeline. And but it feels like we're always in such a hurry with rowing. We have to do everything before we're 19. And I don't think that really goes hand in hand with being a lifelong sport. And if we can do it a little healthier, I think that the ADM model allows us to slow it down and walk before we can run, but then also develop an appreciation for the journey, not just any one destination along the road.
Right. So let's just jump in and talk about, I like how you describe it as the journey, because I think that's really important. So, you know, if I'm a youth coach and I'm thinking, well, come on, Chris, this is a no-brainer. I'm just going to put kids in boats. I'm going to teach them how to put the blade in, get the blade out, and I'm going to get them to go really fast. That's all, that's what I'm going to do. So talk to me about ADM. I'm a brand new coach, and I'm saying, listen, I just want to make kids fast. Where do you start with me?
Well, I think it's important, when you're younger, you want to win every race. When you're a younger coach and even when you're a kid. And so I think the coach is a very important part of the whole process, because the kids and the families take their cues from the coach. And if the coach is only valuing the results, then it sort of robs everybody of what the best parts of rowing are. I mean, rowing mixes in the love of the outdoors and being outdoors, which we all know is healthier. Just being around water is something that is, we have the symbiotic relationship with water. But I also think that it's important that if we're telling kids your value is only as good as your performance, and it's sort of like the SAT, every kid is supposed to be, their value revolves around a number. I don't think that's fair to the kid. And if I'm a parent, which I am, I have 2 teens right now that are doing all kinds of sports. I want them to be, their bodies to be healthy, the training to be healthy, the culture to be healthy, but I want them to be happy too. And if there can only be one winner, right? If you really want to boil it down, only one person wins a race. Everybody else comes behind the winner. And so I think if we can get back to enjoying the sport for all the aspects of it, the healthy part of it, the outdoors part of it. Think about this. Rowing's unique because you're only as good as the weakest person in the boat, which means that everybody matters. How in the days, the world we live in today, how often do kids get to feel like they matter? Well, in rowing, you're the weakest person is the most important person in the boat because you can only go as fast as that person. So everybody sort of, circles around that person to make them better. That's a healthy atmosphere. So I would hope that we can start with the younger coaches, to your question, to get them to value the participation, to get them to value how well-rounded an athlete and a person that they have on their team and how they all fit into a bigger picture.
Kenzie, in thinking about, I was reading on the USOPC website all about ADM, and one thing I noticed, I don't know if it was missing per se, but I didn't see a lot of talk about, and so I wonder if you can talk about this from your perspective, the coach's role in developing a culture and leading the way in terms of how the kids engage with one another. Because also, Chris and I share this, parents of teenagers playing sports, and I personally often see that missing, where I wish the coach were taking the time to help the kids build that relationship among one another. And I wonder, even some low-hanging fruit around, hey, do you know your teammates' names? So do you have specific recommendations for coaches or athletes maybe who are leading their own teams around that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and one that really, I think, has become a foundation of ADM, and what it is quality coach training. And that obviously can take many forms. That can take, certification through just knowing all of the technical, tactical aspects, right, of your sport. But it can also take form in more of that sort of social emotional development and understanding of how your team is working, understanding your athletes well. And so when we say coach training as part of ADM, it's not just encompassing sort of the bare bones things that you need to know to be a successful coach. It's those intricacies, those special qualities that ultimately make you a really, really good coach in the eyes of your athletes. And that's ultimately the goal of ADM. We're hoping to facilitate this model in a way that creates more positive sport experiences. So recognizing that it definitely is centered on the coach, but it doesn't start and end with them, right? Like parents can be involved with this, athletes themselves can be involved with this, NGBs can be involved with this. So there are so many players in the game, so to speak, that can positively contribute to athlete sport experiences. But yes, you're entirely right that a lot centers on the coach and quality coaching.
And what does that look like? I mean, can you give examples of that for coaches listening, rowing, any sport, but we have rowing coaches probably more likely to be listening. What does that look like on the ground? What are examples of that to put into their own practice?
So I know many NGBs have put together a lot of coach resources that can help coaches on the field of play actually enact on all of the great things that ADM is pushing for. So anything from practice plans that they can reference to support more small-sided games and encourage fun. There are a lot of materials and resources out there for how to start hard conversations with your team, how to be a positive leader, not just in your role of sport, but in your role as a coach and a mentor. So lots of great stuff out there. I know rowing has done a ton too, just engaging a lot of different expertise and pulling together a lot of resources, Chris and team, to thank for that. And so lots of great stuff out there, but it's just, I guess, trying to find it.
Chris, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you're going to have the answer for this. So specifically thinking about coaches and being at practice, and there was a lot of language around bringing, talking to athletes about, young athletes about having fun. So how do you bring fun How do you bring fun into rowing?
Well, I think you have to make the boathouse or the practice space that has multi-purpose, right? One of the things that we know is that what we're doing is we're seeing a lot of early specialization. So you're getting people that'll join a sport and they go all in. So year round they play one sport. The problem with that is when athletes used to do multiple sports, they learn something different from each sport, whether it be speed or agility or power. You learn different things from different sports. If you're only going to do rowing and sit on your butt and go backwards, then you're using the same muscles in the same sequence, and you're going to see overuse injuries creeping in. The other thing is volume. What we see is these kids that they're doing the same sport year round, they're increasingly adding too much volume for what is appropriate for them at each level. So the funny thing is it should be easy to add in fun. It should be easy to add in variety, because if you're going to have the kids year round in one place, you can find ways you can add in things that will help with, learning opportunities. You can talk about hydration and nutrition. You can talk about all the things because you have a captive audience year round. You can space it so that they're constantly learning. You can add in running. You can add in games, teamwork games where they learn to trust each other, build upon, each other in confidence. You can add in swimming. You can do anything you want. I know, but here's also a dangerous part. If you're going to add in things like gaining power or strength by doing weightlifting, in 2016, I asked a room filled with coaches, about 100 coaches, how many people lifted, and everybody lifted. And then I asked how many of you know how to teach weightlifting as per the USA weightlifting guidelines, and like 6 people out of 100, did. So you have to be careful when you're looking to increase the variety, which is fun. When kids are doing different things, they're more engaged. If they're doing the same thing over and over again, they get bored. Whether it's school or sports or whatever, jobs. So it's up to the coach to be intentional, to divide the space up every day and the time, to give a variety of activities for the kids.
Yeah. I think that's a good answer. I met somebody at a regatta this summer who was from Italy, and he talked about how youth rowers in Italy, very often they'll send them out in singles, I imagine, tubby singles, and they'll throw a soccer ball out with them. Have you heard of this, Chris? And then they'll have to play some version of soccer, obviously not using their feet. And it's just about getting comfortable in the boats and also, by the way, having some fun, right? I thought that was a great example. So, and I like your ideas around, games or other ways for the athletes to get to know one another. So it's not just all about how do I learn the technical aspect and then how do I get really fast, but how do I learn about my teammates and about myself and sort of enjoy the journey for sure. Why is this, Chris? I know this is so important to you, which I love. And I wonder why you think ADM is so critical to the rowing community.
Well, I would say that number one, I'm really worried about the overuse injuries and the frequency of injury in our kids. Rowing is a non-contact sport, but it does put a lot of load on backs. And so if you're looking at a sport where you don't want to impact somebody for life, you definitely don't want to be messing with things like that. But I look at rowing, and so if you figure we have between anywhere from 10 to 13,000 kids a year that graduate as rowers, and the masters don't grow that much, then where are they all going? Because there's only about 3,000 seats in college. So we're losing about 10,000 kids a year in a sport that is a lifelong sport, if you allow it to be. So how are we losing these athletes? The burnout factor to me is a big issue. Between the overuse injuries and the burnout, we are responsible for the health and well-being of these kids physically. Of course, we all agree on that. But we also need to think about it from a burnout. Like, we need to worry less about results and more about how Simone Biles shone a big light at the Olympics this year, and we need to find a way. If they're happy places on the water, how do we keep them? How do we enable them to empower them to have access to the water for the rest of their lives? We all love it. So for me, it's a big part of our sport to find a way to retain for our sport, just in the health of our sport, right? As the NGB, retention is a major part of our mission. So keeping them healthy physically and keeping them happy and engaged and not burned out mentally and emotionally, these are things that come with having a more practical approach to training and whatnot. So
do you wish, Chris, that young rowers, youth rowers in this country were not year-round rowers? Would you, if you could choose, would you say, I would love it if kids played another sport in their
well,
careers?
I'm a rowing coach, so I love rowing, and I'm always bragging about rowing. I do wish that boathouses found ways to diversify the activities at the boathouse. I'm a big believer in the kids having a safe place to go, and the boathouse is a safe place to go. We, at the home club, we do SAT courses. We do everything there, and the kids come to feel that place as a safe place. So if we could just find a way to take that safe place and diversify the type of activities that come out of it, I think we would have much healthier athletes. The other thing that I think that Kenzie would tell you is that we're not creating better athletes. The athleticism is going down because kids are specializing so early. And so if we could use our boathouses, it would have a huge impact. If we use our boathouses more fully and not be in such a rush, we could make better athletes who happen to row. Right now, we're focused on making fast rowers who happen to be athletes, somewhat athletic. I think we have it backwards.
Right. To me, the challenge seems to be, because I've heard about how, junior programs feel all this pressure to, and then collegiate programs as well, to just, increase the volume, and everybody else is doing it. So if you want to be competitive, that's what you need to do. So it would have to be sort of this collective, right? Okay, we're all agreeing that we're going to spend the first year just learning how to row well. Not about speed. And then we're all agreeing. So, I mean, to me, that feels a little overwhelming, this idea that we could ever get this collective agreement among coaches nationwide to sort of change the approach. But I guess in essence, that's sort of what you're talking about. Is that right?
It is. And, it's not such a foreign thought, because if you go to many of the rowing countries of the world throughout Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they have a much healthier relationship with rowing as a lifetime sport. Same thing with soccer. Many of the countries that love soccer, you can love a 0-0 game and think it was a great game. It's an American thing that somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. And let's not forget that college plays a massive role in this, because chasing a college scholarship, every 15, 16-year-old parent thinks their kid's going to get a scholarship. There's a lot of hope there. And so we're all chasing we're chasing that goal instead of just looking at this holistically. We have, whether it's, with all the D1 scholarships for the young women, or, all of the opportunities at Ivy Leagues, everybody's hoping. Statistically, it's easier to get into most colleges through rowing than any other sport by percentages. And so everybody thinks that, I've got to beat everybody around me. My ERG score's got to be this. I've got to win this many races for my resume. And it's not necessarily the truth, versus the number of spots that are there versus the number of kids that are rowing.
So I'm going to shift this for a moment over back to Kenzie, but Chris, feel free to jump in too. But so where do adaptive rower athletes or para athletes fall into the ADM model and effort?
It's a great question, and one that in recent years, I would say we've put especially more intentionality and effort into outlining that, right? Because ultimately it's going to come down to the sport and what makes most sense in their context. But ADM across the board is ADM. That's really what it's getting at. It's encouraging fun at all levels. It's supporting developmentally appropriate skill and development. It's keeping kids in sport, not dropping out, not getting burnt out, supporting quality coaching, and so on. So how that's done in a sport can vary, but between able-bodied and Paralympic sport, it really crosses the board. Just perhaps with Paralympic sport, there might be some additional considerations when you're working one-on-one with an athlete or a group of athletes, but those general concepts and values remain.
So if you were advising parents who are not athletes themselves and they have a young teenager getting involved in sports, Kenzie, do you have any sort of advice to them for what to look out for as their, young adults enter into, it doesn't need to be rowing, but any sport, what should they be on the lookout for? Like, what does a quote unquote good program look like versus, hey, maybe try a different sport or a different program? Is there anything that you say, these are really good things that you should be running towards, whether it's the coaching or the program design, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say all of it. Of course, you can't expect, even at this point, just with ADM being a little bit newer, you can't expect a sport to have it all. But at the same time, you can definitely see the intentionality and action that's been taken towards getting to those areas of better support for athletes. So, for instance, for a parent, when you're looking at a sport, ask your NGB, hey, do you have ADM? In what form? What does it look like? How have you enacted on this? Ask about competition and participation guidelines. What does the sport currently adopt across the country in terms of those participation and competition rates? What is the coach training that's involved? So what to expect for your young athlete's coach? What training are they going to go through? What qualities are they going to have? And then I think another big one is evaluation. So how is the sport constantly improving? How are we constantly looking inward and outward to make sure that we're doing better by these athletes? And those can take form in many different questions, but those are the big things I would look for as a parent or recommend for parents.
Yeah, those are really thoughtful questions. I think people would be impressed with that list. So, Chris, bringing that over to you, for parents who have new rowers, I back when I was running Row New York, I remember always thinking, these parents are really brave to just let us take their kids out on a river in New York City and then drive them to races. And I mean, they were in good hands. But it felt like a real sort of leap of faith on their part to me. So I'm wondering, what questions do you think that parents could be asking of leaders or coaches if they were new to rowing?
Well, I'd want to know the time. As a parent, I want to know the time, the expectations on my kids that are going to need for time. I'd want to know the goals of the club. I'd listen a lot to my kids, how they feel when they get in the car, or notice, do my kids share a sense of excitement and excitement to get to the boathouse, to get to practice? Or is it dread? Are they dreading going, right? I'd like to know things like, I'd listen a lot to the coach. Is the coach somebody who yells? Is the coach somebody that seems really has a high, level of empathy or emotional intelligence? How does it make my kid feel? Those would be the things that matter the most to me in today's day and age. Because I don't want them showing up at practice because I'm dropping them off or I paid for it. I want them to go because they're empowered by it and they love it. I would also, retention is a big thing. If you're dropping your kid off at a place that can't retain its athletes, there's a reason. So I would really be careful about the goals that are set and who do those goals serve? Do they serve the kids, or do they serve the resumes of the coaches trying to create something? As with any job, when somebody goes to apply, if they've been to 20 places in the last 20 years, that's a red flag. So what's the longevity of the staff there? Those are all things I think listening and watching are really important for a parent, more important than hoping, to be honest.
Right. I love that description of how does it make them feel? Is there anything else we're missing here? Is there anything else you want to make sure? And Kenzie, I'll start with you. The USOPC wants to make sure, and just in case I should have said this earlier, it's the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee is the USOPC. Is there anything you want to make sure that parents, athletes, coaches, heads of youth sports programs know from your perspective that we didn't cover today about ADM?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just say there's a lot of information out there, a lot of good stuff, but ADM is still growing. So it doesn't hurt to ask questions and inquire of your sport, of your NGB, of your club, of your coach, to just ask how they are positively supporting your athlete's development, or as an athlete, how are you going to format practices and competition so that I know that I am developing in the best way possible for me? It doesn't hurt to ask. So that would be my biggest recommendation is, despite all the resources and stuff out there, like Chris said, don't assume, just ask and see what your sport is currently doing, what your club, your coach, your athlete is currently doing to support that experience.
That's such a good way of framing it. Chris, anything you want to make sure that all those groups are hearing from us at US Rowing?
I think it's important that parents are the parents. When I didn't have kids, I was always annoyed when parents would ask me too many questions. And then all of a sudden I have kids and I'm like, well, wait a minute, like no 24-year-old volleyball coach is going to tell me. And so I would say that there's a way to make sure at the end of the day, your responsibility is still to keep your kid safe and healthy. And so, stay in tune to how they're feeling. But also injuries are red flags. If there's too many of them, or if they're constantly down or constantly negative, there's a way to talk to engage the board of a club or to talk to a coach, and any coach who really has the best interest of your young athlete in mind should be open to questions, because that's your job as their parent. So, rowing's intimidating because it comes with its own vocabulary. Parents sit in the car, they don't know what the kids are talking about. We have all these different words. And kids don't want parents being involved. I get it all the time. I'm a coach and my kid does not want me involved in their athletics at all. So I get it. At the same time, look for the signs, both happy and, dangerous. Look for the red flags and the happy flags to make sure that you are advocating for your child.
I'm so glad you said that, Chris, because I think there's this sense from so many parents that, especially of teenagers, they don't want me involved. I better just sit back, keep my mouth shut. And sometimes it's good for parents to sit back and for us to keep our mouths shut. But I think sometimes there's this culture where the feeling is the coach and his or her word or process is sacred. And I shouldn't interfere, and I shouldn't say anything, and I shouldn't express concerns. But sometimes parents, and we see that, unfortunately, we see the worst cases of that, where parents maybe should have asked that question, right? And it's okay to ask the question. It's okay to say, hey, I have a concern, or I'm wondering about this. Because I've just seen too many times where, and you have too, Chris, where nobody says anything because they think, oh, I guess this is normal. I guess this is fine. I'm not going to be the one to sort of, stick my neck out and say, hey, I have a worry. So I'd say, ask the question. I would also say, just from my perspective, having worked with youth for so long, there's so many easy ways to engage kids and make things fun that coaches can utilize. And also just building relationships. And teenagers, they love to be asked questions about, especially not from their parents. Forget their parents, right? But from other caring adults to just like, hey, how was school today? Or like, is the food in the cafeteria getting any better? Or just like being seen, right? As young athletes and progress being recognized or small achievements being recognized. That goes a really long way. So the last question I always ask guests on this podcast is always the same. And we're going to start with Chris because, Kenzie, I don't want to put you on the spot. And I know we're getting near dinner time. Is you've gone for a hard row. Chris, we're going to make you row. And what is your go-to? You're getting off the water, you've been out there for a while. What's your go-to thing to eat? Meal. You don't have to make it. I know you can cook, but somebody else made it for you.
It's easy. Chocolate milk. Chocolate milk is the go-to post-row. I mean, well, better yet, we have a place called Stewart's here. So chocolate milkshake across the bridge.
Chocolate milkshake. Good answer, Chris.
Chocolate milkshake. It's kind of a big deal.
Okay,
I'm
going to have to get one of those in Saratoga. Okay, Kenzie, did I stress you out? Are you ready?
I don't know. How do you follow chocolate milk? I mean, it's a good one.
Or chocolate milkshake.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, you can be your own woman. What is it for you?
I love it. So I have a good answer and then I have the true answer. So my good answer would be a protein shake. My true answer would be a carton of strawberries. Just I am a go-getter for the strawberries.
Wait, that's a very healthy answer.
I mean, when you eat a whole carton, is it healthy?
Of course Maybe. It is. If it makes you happy, it's healthy.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. So yes, it's healthy.
The other thing would be grapes or a banana.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, you're just trying to recover from the chocolate.
Well, look, Kenzie's making me feel like I would say grapes and a banana if you could redo that.
Uh-huh. You already said the chocolate milkshake, Chris.
I was going to say, I promise strawberries are my favorite food, and I was not throwing you under the bus.
Well, listen, thanks to both.
Hold on. Excuse me. Amanda, what would your answer be?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so hungry right now, so it's hard to answer that. And I have all sorts of conditions. Is it a cold day? Is it a hot day? Is it a cold day or is it a hot day?
You're fired up because you just had the best practice of your week. So even if it's a cold day, you have steam coming off you. What are you going for?
Oh, I love a good diner. I love a good diner after a practice with like eggs and cheese. And I mean, bonus points if they have like good New York bagels, but if they don't, any kind of rye toast with butter is good. And hash browns, like well cooked.
Wow,
and
full
black
spread.
coffee.
This isn't your Monday through Friday practice schedule, is it?
Well, I ate a lot back in the day, but no, not so much. No, now I try to rein it in. Usually, I love to obviously talk about food. Anyway, we're showing you our rower side, Kenzie.
There you go.
Yep. So listen, both of you, thank you so much. I personally love this topic. I think it's so important to be thinking about and talking about, and I hope that we can be US Rowing and USOPC, but that we can be resources to coaches and program leaders and to athletes and parents of athletes, and really just in all sports, but since it's rowing we're talking about here, really try to make sure that young athletes have a really positive experience that's filled with, fun and joy and laughter and challenge. And I think, Chris, you said it perfectly, really thinking about prioritizing their experience because it should be about them. So, and I know that, Chris, that is first and foremost for you at all times. And we're so lucky to have you here at US Rowing leading that.
Could I add that we are going to have our website out pretty soon that's going to be filled with our version of ADM, the rowified version, and there'll be a lot of resources for parents, kids, and coaches that they can go. There'll be stuff on there for each of them at all phases of their entry into rowing and then throughout the enjoying rowing. So there'll be a little something for everybody.
Yeah. So everyone can find that on the US Rowing website soon. And thank you both so much. And go eat chocolate milkshakes and strawberries and stuff.
Woo-hoo.
And that's all for this episode of The Swing of Things. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Kenzie and Chris. Remember to like, share, and follow from wherever you get your podcasts. It helps others to find us. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss future episodes. And thanks for listening.